Howdy, y'all. My name's Steve, grateful recovered alcoholic. Power of God showed up in my life August 15, 2011, separated me from alcohol, and I'm grateful for that, really grateful. What a wonderful conventions has been. We really had some really good speakers. Good food? All right, then. I am here to introduce Mr. Brad, a good friend of mine since 2013, the year I got to Lubbock, Texas. And Brad's an interesting individual. He didn't want to speak for YPAA in 2017 because he said, I didn't get sober in YPAA, I got sober in AA. But Brad is 37 years old with 20 years of continuous sobriety, and you're gonna have a good time with Brad. Hey, Brad, come on up.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brad, and I'm an alcoholic. With the grace of my God, I got a sobriety date of March 30th, 2003, and I'm real grateful for that today. Are we okay volume-wise and everything like that? All right, I'll try not to hit stuff. Sounds good. So thank y'all all for being here. I know you just ate, so you're probably about to get really tired. I'll try to keep this fairly entertaining. We'll see. We'll, kind of move things along here. But yeah, so, I'm grateful for Steve for asking me to speak here. And as you can probably tell, I am not a young person, right? I am not. But I am in AA. And I was a young person at one point in time who was also in AA, right? So we're going to go with that, right? I think that's probably going to be good enough for us. And we're just going to call that good. But I got to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, same old story. I vividly recall the first drink that I ever took, and it was great. And it was me and a buddy in a blackout, and it was amazing, right? It was absolutely amazing. And I got in trouble the very next day because I grew up in a small community. I grew up over in Levelland, and everybody knew everybody, and my mother pretty quickly figured out what had happened. And I before we continue on here, y'all should probably know, or rather, I like to say that I was raised by some amazing human beings, some really, really beautiful people, right? Worked hard. I grew up on the right side of the tracks. They worked hard to give me absolutely anything that I could ever possibly need, and most of the things that I wanted, right? There was absolutely, if you look at my history, there is absolutely no reason for me to be an alcoholic, right? Externally. In fact, the longer that I stay sober, the better my childhood gets, which is kind of crazy. I don't know how that works out. But those people have become, or were, when I was younger, really amazing human beings, and are still really amazing human beings to this day. And I'm incredibly grateful for my parents. But anyway, what you people told me is that it doesn't matter how you grow up. There's a whole lot of people that grew up with great childhoods that are alcoholics, and there's a whole lot of people that grew up with crappy childhoods that aren't alcoholics, right? None of that really matters. I really thought it mattered when I got here, right? I thought there had to be some kind of abuse or trauma or whatever the case may be. And I'm really grateful for my first sponsor who sat me down and helped me understand what an alcoholic is, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But, that first drink was me and a buddy in a blackout, and I got busted right after that, and I got in a whole lot of trouble, and man, I couldn't wait to do it again, right? And that next drunk was me and a buddy and a bottle of Mad Dog 2020 and half a joint. And man, I'm here to tell you, life gets really, really good with some Mad Dog 2020 and some marijuana, some THC in your system, right? I was rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence. I could comprehend the word serenity, and I knew peace. Time. I don't know if y'all know this or not, but at that level, time kind of stops. Right? Especially the first time. For me, it did. It stopped, and man, something clicked, and I just knew that this is exactly what I was going to do, as much as I possibly could. Right? I was gonna run it all the way to the hilt. Just knew it. And it wasn't very long after that. In fact, just a couple of months when I'm drinking. I'm getting loaded. 3-4 times a week, and just a couple of months after that, when I'm getting loaded every single day to fall asleep, and not too long after that when the alcohol in other forms come into my life, right? The white powdery forms and things like that, and the solid pill forms and all of that fun stuff. And it's not long after that when I'm drinking, in the mornings just to be able to walk out the front door, right? Just to walk out. Not because I got the DTs or anything like that, but God, I just can't face life, right? I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I just can't get to work. I just can't get to class. I just can't get to wherever it is. Right? I just can't do it without a couple of drinks. And that's what alcohol did for me, right? You people told me when I got here that for most, like alcohol does the same thing to me that it does to everybody else, right? It gets me drunk, right? It gets everybody drunk. But it does something for me that it doesn't do for other people, right? And alcohol made life possible for me. It just made life possible, right? I could do it with a couple of drinks. The problem was for me, I don't know about for you guys, I suspect it's the same problem because we're in the same room. The problem is that, those couple of drinks would make life possible, but then I've got this disease of alcoholism, right? This body that's allergic to alcohol that says that anytime I put it into my system, I'm going to have this atypical reaction, right? I'm going to have this allergy, the book calls it, where I just can't stop. I just can't stop, right? And so I can get to that level where life is possible, but man, I can't just turn it off right there. And a whole lot of people in my world, we call them normal drinkers, they can turn it off, right? And I can't do that. I can't turn it off. And so it's not long after I'm, staying loaded every day before the psychologists and the psychiatrists and the doctors and the psych wards and, all this stuff starts happening, right? All the stuff. I call it the he's, she's, it's, thems, and theys. All the things, all the external things that I tried to grab onto to make life manageable, right? To make it to where I could drink and. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm a drink or, right? I can either drink or I can go to work. I can either drink or I can show up on time. I can either drink or I can do anything else, right? I'm a drink or. I'm not a drink and. So these he's, she's, it's, thems, and theys, I'm trying and 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 I'm trying just to make life tolerable, right? Just tolerable. I don't care about great anymore. I don't care about any of that stuff. I just got to get through today. I just got to, do whatever I got to do to be able to walk out the front door and show up and try to exist. And that goes on for a little while. And eventually, I wind up, just like all of us do, right? There's the ER trips and the ICUs and all of that fun stuff. We call it fun. I didn't realize at the time, I've been sober for a little while now. I have never once been to an ICU in sobriety. Did y'all know that? Like, that's not a common thing that people do. I didn't realize that, right? I haven't had to go to a psych ward, or I didn't realize that wasn't a common thing. I did go to the ER. I have been to the ER one time, and it was for a legitimate medical emergency, right? It wasn't one of those things where the ER doctor looks at you and says, "Oh, another one of you." Okay. It wasn't one of those deals, right? Anyway, I come to in San Angelo. I grew up in Loveland, and I come to in San Angelo after a week-long blackout that ended in a coma, and I come to in an ICU, and I look over, and my mother is right there beside the bed. God, and it hurts me to this day. And, I kind of come to in this ICU with my mother right there by the bed, and my eyes open just enough, and the first words out of my mouth are, "What did I do this time?" And I'm conscious just long enough to see that woman fall apart, right? And then I slip back into unconsciousness. And if you're replaying the tape of my life, right, certainly from the inside, but if you're replaying the tape of my life, you say that right there, that's the bottom, right? That's as low as a person needs to go, right? You don't have to go any lower than that to get sober. But I did, right? That was not where I got sober. That was not the end of the road. That was, I continued on and went lower and lower and lower. But I'm grateful for that trip because there was a psychologist there, and he said, "Hey, this kid's got this kid's an alcoholic, right? He needs to be in rehab." And of course, my family fought it, right? Because they're in a whole lot of denial and things like that, which I respect. And I fight it because, God, I don't want to do that. Like, I can't live drunk, let alone sober, right? Like, life is hard enough drunk. And, continue on and fight it and fight it and fight it. And then one day the day comes when, my family in the meantime, what they had done is they had talked to members of Alcoholics Anonymous that they knew, right? Not family members or anything like that, just people that they knew that were in AA. And those people told them that, let him go on his last run. And when he's on his last run, then ask him if it's time. And if he says yes, man, and I'm grateful for this to this day. If he says yes, you do whatever you could possibly do, right? Whatever you got to do, you do it. And I'm grateful that they did that, right? I'm grateful that they let me go until I got to that last run. And then at the end of that last run, they said, is it time to go to rehab? And for whatever reason, the fight was gone in me, right? The fight was gone. It wasn't I just didn't have it left, right? And so the word, like, I wasn't all on board with anything. I just said, okay, right? And I'm grateful that they did what they did, and they got me into rehab. And I'm grateful for the rehab that said, look, kid, about all we can do is keep you sober for a couple of days at best. Maybe, if you're lucky, you'll stay sober a couple of days. But after this, man, you really got to get to AA, right? And so when I finally left that place, and which was weird, I stayed the whole time. I don't understand how that works either, but I stayed the entire time, and I got out and I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm grateful for the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as I get older and continue on in this deal, I'm grateful for the people in my life that have allowed me to come to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because let's be honest, right? Like, we're not the best people in the world, Like, if I were to look at my daughter and say, hey, where do you want to go today? And she says Alcoholics Anonymous, like, I'm going to have some concerns, some concerns. But, I say that jokingly because I've never, to this day, I've never looked at any member of my family, which it's also important to note, the only people who have ever seen me drink in my life today, and I've got a beautiful life today, full life today, the only people who have ever seen me drink are my immediate family, and that's it, right? Everybody else knows me as a fairly decent human being, right? I'm not great. I'm not a saint by any stretch of the imagination. A fairly decent human being, right? That's a whole lot better than what I was when I got here. A whole lot better than what I was. But anyway, they got me to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you people kept talking about a sponsor and praying and, yada, 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 yada. And for whatever reason, I did what you people told me to do, right? And I got me a sponsor, and that first sponsor, his name was Randy, and he had 2 years sober, right? Which to me was unimaginable. Like, how do you stay sober for 2 years? I'll say this, in the rehab, I don't know about y'all, but about 2 weeks sober, I'm ready to conquer the world and, shout this thing from the rooftops and all that fun stuff. And I remember going to a counselor there and on fire, and God, this is great, and I love it, and what do I have to do to be a counselor in a rehab center, right? And the first thing she said, well, first you got to have 2.5 years sober. And then she kept talking, and I quit listening, right? Because 2.5 years sober, that's impossible. That's impossible. Like, the best I could do was 2 weeks sober, right? That was the best I could do. And that was white knuckling it the entire time. And she wants 2.5 years sober? Oh my God. So this first sponsor had 2 years sober, right? But more importantly, he had what I wanted. He had a measure of peace and stability in his life, right? A measure of peace and stability. And man, we would sit down, and I'm so grateful for that man, because he would take me all kinds of places. And he's the one that sat me down and helped me understand what an alcoholic is, right? Out of the doctor's opinion. It's really, really basic. There's one thing that makes me an alcoholic. There's a whole lot of stuff that comes along with it. But there's one thing that makes me an alcoholic, right? And that's the allergy, right? How does my body react to alcohol once I put it in there? If yours reacts like mine, then you're an alcoholic, right? If it says I want more and more and more and more and more, that's all it is, right? Really basic, really simple. It's medical. It's not moral, right? Because when I got here, I thought it was moral. Turns out it's medical. Now, he did also help me realize that I've got this brain that's pretty screwed up too, right? Because this brain will tell me that a drink's a good idea no matter what, 10 times out of 10. Alone and unaided, I will pick up a drink again, right? That is every bit as true today, right here, right now, as it was the day I walked in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Every bit is true. Every bit. In fact, if you don't think I'm telling the truth, go look at those pictures back there and then ask yourself why so many of those people aren't here today, right? A whole lot of people in those pictures back there that aren't here today, right? This is a very serious disease. Not because my body's different, but because my brain's screwed up, right? My brain, the book says the real problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, right? If I've got an allergy to strawberries, makes no difference, right, if I just don't eat strawberries. But if I got a brain that says that, man, strawberries are a good idea, right, the real problem's in my mind. So I've got a brain, I've got a body that can't handle alcohol and a brain that won't let me leave it alone, right? That's the whole business case for working the rest of the program. And that's what that first sponsor helped me understand. Said I got a body that can't handle alcohol and a brain that won't let me leave it alone. And so I got to work the rest of these steps to get connected with a power greater than myself that can step into that insanity, right, and get in between me and a drink when it's going to come up. Because I'm here to tell you, in sobriety, I've had those strange mental blank spots that the book talks about, right? And by the way, y'all were the only ones talking about that when I got here. I wondered why it was that I could go for a little while without drinking and then suddenly, go on a binge and not realize it, not even think twice about picking up a drink. It's that strange mental blank spot, right? Y'all were the only ones talking about that stuff when I got here. The doctors weren't talking about it. The psychiatrists weren't talking about it. The psychologists weren't talking about it. You people were talking about it. And I thought, man, that makes a lot of sense, right? That's why all those times when I'm in the back seat and my mother's in the front seat and she's just tears streaming down her face of, Brad, why did you do this again, right? Why did you do this again? And the only answer I have is, I don't know, right? It's that strange middle blank spot, right? It's that time when, so my last drunk, I thought I had been at this time I'm trying to keep myself sober because I'm a pretty smart cookie. And I figured out that, it's the drinking and the drugs that are really ruining my life. And so I just need to stay away from those and I'll be fine, right? And so I'm trying this whole keeping myself sober thing. And I think I've been sober for about 30 days. Turns out it was 3 days, right? I've been sober for 3 days. Yeah. And this is exactly the way it happened, right? I'm working a job by myself, which was good because I'm not a social butterfly, especially not at this point in my life. And I was working outside, which was good. And, it's exactly what Fred talks about. Beautiful spring day, not a cloud in the sky. And this thought, and the thought process sounded exactly like this in my head. It said, I'm sitting there and I'm patting myself on the back and I say, man, this being clean and sober thing is great. Let's go get loaded. Okay, right? Just like that strange mental blank spot, right? We laugh about it in here because we identify, right? Now, what happened after that, and so I'm under house arrest and I don't have any money and yada, yada, yada. I've got to do all the lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating in order to go get loaded. So I spend the next 2 hours of my life dead set on how am I going to do this, right? How am I going to get this done? And then I get it done, right? Talk about willpower, right? I've got this extreme focus as soon as that insanity kicks in. And the thought never occurred to me, man, maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe you shouldn't do this, Brad. Never once occurred to me, right? Never once. Because the insanity of the first drink had returned, and I drank again, right? It's exactly what the book talks about. It says the insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And that's exactly what happens to me 10 times out of 10, alone and unaided. That's what happens. And so I come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you people say, I've got a body that can't handle alcohol, a brain that won't let me leave it alone. The only shot I've got is a power greater than myself. Again, the doctors and the psychologists and the psychiatrists, they weren't saying any of that. They were saying, here, take this pill, and here, take that pill, and here, these pills will help too, right? And I'm taking all of those pills. But you people are coming in here saying, Brad, there's got to be something bigger than you because you're obviously not big enough to do it, right? And we're not the answer. We just know how to get to the answer, right? And in most groups, there's 12 steps on the wall. Like, we just know how to get there. We're not it, right? And it's important for me to make the distinction that Alcoholics Anonymous is not the answer. This is where I come to find the path to the answer, right? You people don't keep me sober because you're a human power, right? And no human power can keep me sober. That includes me, that includes you, that includes everything. But you do have a very clear-cut set of directions that if I will follow them, I can get to that power, right? I can get to that solution. And that's what this journey in Alcoholics Anonymous has been about, right? It's first coming in here and identifying with you people because the identification is the most important part, right? Talked to a guy just briefly a moment ago, right? 90 days sober. 90 days sober, right? If you've got some time in here, think about 90 days sober. How important is it to identify at 90 days sober? Because if I don't identify with you, I don't need to do what you did, right? If you don't have something I want, then it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And I'm so grateful when I walked in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you people helped me identify, right? You helped me identify. You said, man, when we were in that spot, this is what we did, right? And I'm here to tell you, at 90 days sober, and still actually throughout the first couple of years, I would just have just random blackouts, right? Like I just had no idea what was going on or would lose spots of time. In fact, I spent my 18th birthday at an AA conference, and I couldn't tell you what AA conference I was at until probably about 5 years ago when I went back to that same conference, right? And I was like, oh, this is where I was, Oh, okay. This looks vaguely familiar. So grateful for the people in Alcoholics Anonymous who showed up and said, get in the truck, kid, we're going, right? And they took me to conferences and they helped me work the steps. And When my first sponsor, I'll be forever grateful for him because, working through 1, 2, and 3, as soon as I realized that business case of I've got a body that can't handle this and a brain that won't let me leave it alone, right? I need to get something bigger than me. And those first 1 and 2 for me, 2 was really just maybe it's possible that there's something bigger than me. Maybe, right? Because I got in here with a lot of resentment towards God, a lot of resentment. So maybe it might be possible, right? And then step 3 is really just maybe that thing can do this bit better than I can. Maybe, right? I have no idea. The book says that as soon as a man is even willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's on the right track, right? And I was willing to believe, right? I didn't believe anything in the beginning. I still to this day, right? I've got my relationship with this power greater than myself is a lot different than it was when I got here. But there are still a lot of times, and I think the Al-Anon speaker mentioned it, right? The chaos comes up, and this situation feels new and different, and I don't trust God, right? I just don't trust God. But you people helped me begin to trust God with turning over the drinking, right? Just turn that over, just the one thing. And then I got to look at all those character defects and make the list, and everybody says that's big and scary. And man, that first go around, I just made a list, right? I took the emotion out of it because I couldn't do the emotion. I've since worked the steps many, 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 many times, and I'm here to tell you the 4th step is great. There are no answers in the 4th step. This is not a 4-step program, right? This is where I see some truth about me that really is not fun, but there's no answers in that, right? Self-knowledge avails me nothing. Right? I tried the self-knowledge thing. It'll never keep me sober. And I move forward, and I start telling somebody else all of this stuff. And, the book really talks about some 5th step promises. I didn't experience that. So the first, the loophole that I love in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with the 5th step is that I don't have to do it with another member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I don't have to do it with you people. I can do it with anybody, right? Any human being will do. And the first time that I did it with a preacher I still had a buddy at that time, the preacher at his church, and I did it that way for one reason, because I knew I never had to see that man again if I didn't want to, right? Because by this time, I knew that I needed to be in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was terrified that if I shared my 5th step with one of you people, that I wasn't going to get to come back, right? I just wasn't, right? Y'all are either going to say, all right, kid, you're either too bad, get the hell out, right? We don't want your kind around here. Or you're going to say, you know what, kid, you weren't bad enough, go get you some more, right? I was terrified of either prospect, because I absolutely knew that I needed to be in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was so terrified that something was going to happen that took this away from me, right? I have since learned, especially through working through the traditions and things like that you people can't kick me out, and that's great for a person like myself, right? Like, you can't do it. Surprise! I'm here. I show up whenever I want to. You can kick me out of a meeting, that's fine, but you can't kick me out of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? You can't take this away from me. And with that power also comes a whole lot of responsibility, because that means that I'm the only person that keeps me away from this. Just me, right? Just me. All those people that I've sat in the rooms with that are no longer in the rooms, right? They're not in the rooms not because of me or anybody else, but because of them, right? And I wake up each morning not wanting to take this thing away from me, right? I don't want to take this thing away from me. So anyway, I do it with that man, and I didn't get any kind of relief, but what I did get was what I felt a lot of what I thought was fear at the time. You people told me that was later, like it was, it's some kind of feeling that I have a really hard time with. Accountability. It was accountability is what it was, right? You said that you are now accountable because now somebody else knows that you know, right? Now somebody else knows that you know. And that fear, I got exactly what I needed at the time in the beginning because it was fear. I've since done, every 5th step I've done since then has been with a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I strongly recommend doing a 5th step with another member of Alcoholics Anonymous over just a random human being. Will the random human being work? Absolutely. 10 times out of 10, it'll work just fine. But man, doing it with another member of AA is powerful. Really, really, really powerful. The first time that I actually got those 5th step promises, I was probably about 9 years sober. And, at 2 years sober, I reworked the steps. And in that 4th step, I came across a secret, right? I was specifically doing a sex inventory because the book says if sex is particularly troublesome, right, we look at this stuff. And I was doing a sex inventory, and man, I came across, something bubbled up to the surface that I didn't know about, right, until that moment, right, that it happened in my addiction, in my disease. when I was still drinking, and it bubbled up to the surface, and man, I just couldn't tell, I couldn't sit across the table from my sponsor. At 2 years sober, because I don't know about y'all, but at 2 years sober, you're supposed to be somebody, right? That's what my brain tells me. Like, I'm really supposed to be somebody and, kind of start, maybe not have this thing down all the way, but definitely have it down a hell of a lot more than I did. Excuse my language, I apologize. But, when that thing came up to the surface, I just couldn't, right? And when my sponsor asked that question, okay, no, what are you not telling me in this fifth step? I just couldn't, right? And I did what every good alcoholic does, and I lied. And I said, nope, that's it, we're good. Let's go on about our merry little way. And I took that secret, that deep, dark secret, and I placed it in the corner of my mind, right? And I would sit in meetings for the next 7 years, and people would say, you're only as sick as your secrets. And I'd think, oh, that's my secret right there. That's how sick I am, right? That's it right there. And every now and again, I'd take the secret out, and I'd pet it, and I'd love it, and, I'd put it back and make sure it was happy. But at about 9 years sober, that secret, God, started coming out sideways, right? Just left and right, and started impacting areas of my life that I never knew that it could. And it started killing me from the inside out. And so I did what every good sober member of AA does, right? I know exactly what the problem is, but I ignore it. And so I think, okay, I'm going to resubmit myself to the process of the steps, knowing full well that that's the thing that's got to come out, right? Like, that's the abscess tooth. That's what's got to be removed. But I'm not going to really focus on that. I'm going to hope that it's something else over here that's going to make me look like a good guy, not that thing over there. And, sure enough, I write it all down, and I get everything on paper, and I do a fifth step with another member of Alcoholics Anonymous who was in another city, so that I never had to see that man again if I didn't want to, right? There's a trend, right? There's a pattern here. And man, I'm here to tell you that we did that fifth step, and he asked that question, okay, what are you not telling me, right? And for whatever reason, I told him the thing that was killing me. And those fifth step promises, right, that is exactly what I felt in that one. That sense of peace and ease, right? The nearness of my Creator and all of those fun things that go along with those fifth step promises. Doing it with another man in Alcoholics Anonymous about the stuff that, that God, I just didn't want anybody else to know about, And it's so funny, too. This is what I love about AA is that, I tell him that deep, dark secret about that stage of my drinking. And he says, Brad, immediately, he says, Brad, when I was at that stage of my disease, this is what I did. And I'm not here to compare notes, but his was probably a little bit worse than mine, right? Yeah? And I thought, oh, thank God, okay. I get to stay sober one more day. And, when I get experiences like that in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have to reflect on how neat a deal this is, right? There's not a whole lot of people in this world that get the opportunity to do something as neat as this, right? Everybody in here, even among alcoholics, it's important to note, we have the minority experience, right? There's not very many of us that get the chance to be sober. There's not very many people that get the chance to work a spiritual program of action. I get to do that today on both accounts, right? I get to do that. That's a neat deal. And so when this stuff kind of hits the fan and everything along those lines, like, I've got some tools that y'all have given me. And one of that is talking with another person and being open and honest about what's going on in my life and all these things that I really don't want to talk about. And so I do that, and I, it's funny again because that's wonderful, and there's a lot of healing that comes with that. But I had a sponsor that would always say that a problem shared is a problem cut in half, but it's still a problem, right? This is not a 5-step program, right? There's still more stuff that I've got to do. And I move forward into those steps, into 6 and 7, which not a whole lot of people talk about, which I'm here to tell you, in my experience, is where the magic is. That's where the magic happens. That's where that stuff that I can't do actually gets done. All the rest of this stuff I can do. There's, I can pray, and I can meditate, and I can write an inventory, and I can talk to an alcoholic, and I can make a list of all the people I've wronged, and I can go and I can make amends, and I can pay the money back, and I can show up on time, and I can do the stuff. But in 6 and 7, right, that's when the stuff that is inside of me, right, the character defects and all the stuff that I can't touch, that self can never heal self, right, that's when the magic happens. That's when this power greater than me comes in and starts doing the things that I can't do. And 6 really, is broken down pretty simply, and For the longest time, I didn't understand why the 12 and 12 says that this is the step that separates the men from the boys until I had some sobriety, right? And I really kind of liked some of my character defects, right? Like, I mean, you know, small things, right? Like, you know, maybe I add an extra 15 minutes to my timesheet, right? Like, is that really stealing? I mean, the boss has enough money anyway, right? Like, it's going to be okay. And then, you know, I mean, I've got all these other things and people to support. I can justify this stuff all day long, right? I mean, I'm not taking money out of my mother's purse anymore, right? Like, I'm not stealing from my 11-year-old sister anymore to go pawn stuff, right? Is it still really stealing? Turns out, yeah, it is, right? Absolutely. If you're working a spiritual program of action, absolutely it is. Absolutely. If you know it's wrong, absolutely. You know, I'm a really big fan of this lust thing too, right? You know, I'm not gonna lie to you. I really, 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 really like it. But like, man, what about when it starts interfering with the relationships that I've built over the years that are really deeply meaningful to me, right? Really deeply meaningful, right? What about when it starts interfering with like the relationship with my wife, right? What does that mean, right? That's when it separates the men from the boys, is when I really love them and I don't want to let them go. And they're not killing me anymore, right? You know, I'm not stealing from my mother. I'm not pawning my sister's stuff, right? I'm not doing whatever it takes to get to the liquor store, right? I'm not doing that stuff anymore. But all these small degrees, right, separate the men from the boys. And am I really willing to surrender those? And when I get to the place where the answer is yes, right, all I really have to do is say please, because that's really all the 7-step is. And I've done the 7-step a whole lot of ways throughout the years. And very rarely, in the 12 it really harps on the word humbly. Rarely do I ever do the 7-step humbly, right? But every single time God says, all right, kid, I'll meet you where you're at, right? No big deal. No big deal. And I'm really, really grateful for that today, right? I'm grateful that I walked into a place where I didn't have to measure up. In fact, it was really good that I didn't measure up. I didn't have to have the answers. In fact, y'all said it was better if I didn't have the answers, right? I didn't have to work this stuff perfectly. In fact, you said it was better if I didn't do it perfectly so that I could do it again, right? I didn't have to do any of that stuff. I'm here to tell you, again, through the grace of my God, I've had the opportunity to be sober for a couple of days now, and the only thing I've done right in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is not take a drink, right? That's about it. It's about the only thing I've ever done right in here. And so I turn this stuff over to a power that's bigger than me, and I just say please. In whatever way that I say please, right? The first time, what I basically did was take a look at all this stuff on paper, crumble it up, and throw it in God's face and say, I can't do this crap anymore, you do it, right? And God said, okay, cool, happy to, right? The last time I did it, it was, it was heartfelt and it was meaningful, and it meant something to me that I was surrendering these things. And God said, okay, cool, right? Whatever. Happy to. Right? No big deal, right? You people told me that there's no big deals in here. And what I've come to find over the years is that this thing that we all call long-term sobriety is nothing more and nothing less than the process of continued surrender at deeper and deeper levels, right? Deeper and deeper levels. And every time that I surrender something new, it feels like it's going to kill me and it's going to turn out horribly and the world's going to fall apart. And what I find is that God knows what God's doing, right? It's no big deal. It's no big deal. And I had a sponsor one time that would always say that it's either going to work out or it's not, and either way, you've got to stay sober, right? And that's what I've come to find in here. I've got a whole lot of experience to share that you people have allowed me to accumulate over the years by really enjoying the minority experience of alcoholism, which is sobriety, right? Sobriety is the minority experience of alcoholism. And I've had the opportunity to experience that, and God, it's a good life, a really good life, right? Not because great things always happen, but just because, man, none of it, I don't know about y'all, but there's this place, I had a sponsor that would always talk about deep down in the place where you live, right? Deep down in the place where I live, right? There's nothing that you can do to hurt me. Deep down in the place where I live, right? Now, you can do all the outside stuff all you want, and some of that stuff is not very fun. But deep down in the place where I live, right? And that's where y'all taught me to get to, is deep down in the place where I live. But eventually, right, once I turn all of these character defects over and stuff like that, there's action and more action, right? And so I've got to make the list, right? And what I find in that 8-step, and you people, this is the rope-a-dope in Alcoholics Anonymous as far as I'm concerned. is because that 8th step really has incredibly little to do with who I actually, what actually needs to be done, and really more to do about forgiving you for the things I think you've done to me, right? I've got to write your name down because I owe you money, and what I realize is that what actually has to happen is that I've got to forgive you for the situation that made me feel like, that I found that I put or that we collectively got ourselves in that made me feel like I had to steal from you, right? Where I felt like you screwed me over or whatever the case may be. When it comes to I'll say this, right? My couple of years, when I was 10 years sober, and then I'll tell you about 2 weeks ago. So when I was 10 years sober, at this point in time, I've got the career, I've got the wife, I've got the kid, I've got the house, I've got the car, I've got the career, right? Life is looking good, kind of that upward trajectory and all that fun stuff, and look at how great I am. I'm also 10 years sober. I mean, come on, people. Like, when I got sober, like, you were at the right hand of God with 10 years sober, So I am, like, in my mind, right, and I don't know this at the time, but in my mind, I'm somebody. I am somebody. And what happens is my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, my sister's coming through town, and she calls me, and she'd been going through some stuff here lately, and she calls, and she says, hey, can I come swing by? And I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Right, and now this is my little sister, and I'm big brother, and I just told you all the things that I've got, right? So clearly she's coming to ask me for advice on how to live her life, right? That's absolutely what she needs. And it couldn't be further from the truth, right? So what happens is we go sit outside, and then she starts to tell me all the ways that my alcoholism affected her as an adult, right? All that stuff that I did 10 years ago, right, that continued to affect her into adulthood. And some of that stuff was hers, but man, some of that stuff was mine, right? And it was stuff that I never knew, right, never considered, right? I'm big brother here. I'm 10 years sober. I'm living life. I'm doing great. And the wreckage of my past is still affecting her. It chokes me up to this day, right? And so, me being the good AA that I am, I realize that this is an opportunity for amends, and so I try to make amends, and I say, what can I do to make this right? And she says, nothing. There's nothing you can do. Oh, God, right? Like, tell me to pay back the money, right? Tell me to do whatever, right? Tell me to just stay sober, which is a real thing, by the way, right? When people say that, they mean stay sober, right? Because you cause less problems when you're sober. Tell me to do anything except nothing, right? There's nothing I can do. And so I did what you people taught me to do, right? I went to my home group, and God, I fell apart. I just fell apart, right? It was tables just like this, and I just wept everywhere. And there was a guy in there with 20-some-odd years, and he said, well, kid, after talking with him after the meeting, he said, well, kid, what you do is you just show up, right? From here on out, she asked for anything. You show up, period. You show up. I said, okay, I can do that. And their relationship began to get better, right? Just showing up, just show up. Began to get better. And today it's a really good relationship. We live in the same city today, and she trusts me with her child, and it's a neat thing. And I get really emotional because, here a couple weeks ago, they were moving houses, and again, she calls me not asking for help, but talking about the logistics and everything like that. And, I give her big brother's advice, which she did not ask for, by the way. What happened is because I gave my advice, I thought I was done, right? And they move, and I'm not there to help them move. Which is funny that I get so emotional over this, right? Like, I used to just really focus every day on how do I not shove a needle in my arm, and how do I not pick up a bottle of whiskey. And now I focus on, like, how do I make these relationships better, right? Which is a beautiful thing as far as I'm concerned. But, she doesn't, and I don't show up. And it's a week or so later, and I'm helping them kind of get everything in the house and all that stuff. And my mother looks over at me, and she says, Brad, it really embarrassed your sister that her big brother wasn't there to help her move. And I thought, oh my God, right? Like, do anything to me, do anything. But tell me that I embarrassed my family one more time, right? Like, that's big today. That's big in my world. And God, it's such a beautiful thing, right? Such a beautiful thing. And you know what got to happen after that was I got to inventory that, right? And I got to see my selfishness and my self-centeredness, and I got to make amends to that woman, to my sister. And then the most beautiful thing happened after that. About 2 days later, she called for help and said, hey, can you come help me do this? And I got to say, yeah, I'll be there, right? It's a beautiful way of life, beautiful way of life. And if you're new in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, God, keep showing up. Keep showing up, because life gets so good when I'm not waking up in the morning fighting a drink, right? I woke up this morning and I wasn't fighting a drink, right? The thought never even occurred to me. Never even occurred to me. And I don't know how to explain what a big deal that is. And if you're in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. And I'm so grateful for that, right? And I'm grateful for you people that taught me the very practical program of action. And now, 10, 11, and 12, I get to keep doing all of that stuff, right? The practical program of action that allows me to live a really, really, really good life and enjoy the minority experience of alcoholism, which is sobriety, right? That's what you people have given me, and I'm so incredibly grateful for that today. That's about all I got. Thanks.